You remember it, don't you? The quiet. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that felt heavy, like the air was thick enough to swallow your words before they ever reached the surface. You learned at a young age that silence was safer than truth, that shrinking yourself kept the peace, that being good meant being invisible. You were the child who noticed everything: the tone, the tension, the shifting moods, the door that closed a little too hard, the sigh that meant stay away, the quietness that meant something is wrong, the smile that meant pretend everything is fine. And so you adapted, quietly, invisibly. You became the emotional shock absorber of the home, without anyone ever asking if your small body could carry that weight. Here is the paradox. The very coping mechanism that protected you as a child, silence, hyper-awareness, emotional self-erasure, is the same mechanism that slowly destroys you as an adult. Because back then, silence kept you safe. But now, it keeps you disconnected from others, from intimacy, and from yourself. You learned to swallow your feelings, and now they sit inside your chest like stones. You learned to predict danger, and now you anticipate rejection, even where love exists. You learned to not need anything, and now you don't know how to receive care, even when someone offers it freely. This is the hidden pain of the child who carries silent trauma. You were forced to grow up before you ever had the chance to just be. And even today, you still live as if you're protecting someone, a parent, a partner, or the child you once were, from the truth of your own emotional hunger. 2. Definition and psychological authority. So what exactly is silent trauma? It's not the trauma that leaves scars on the skin. It's the trauma that shapes the nervous system, the worldview, the core identity, quietly, invisibly, subtly. Psychologists often describe it as relational trauma or developmental wounding. And 3 core concepts explain it with painful clarity. 1. Parentification. This happens when a child becomes the caretaker, emotionally or physically. You learn to anticipate needs, soothe conflict, suppress your own pain, and be strong. But strength, when forced, becomes a cage. 2. Hypervigilance. Children in unpredictable emotional environments develop an internal radar that never switches off. Your nervous system becomes a full-time surveillance camera. Where is the threat? Who is upset? What mood is the room in? How do I stay safe? This rewires the brain, especially the limbic system, so adulthood feels like a constant quiet tension. 3. Avoidance attachment and emotional neglect schema. When your caregivers dismiss, minimize, or ignore your emotional needs, your nervous system learns, my feelings do not matter. I must handle everything alone. This becomes an unconscious identity, not a personality trait, but a survival map. You stop expecting comfort. You stop seeking connection. You stop trusting vulnerability. And the saddest part? People think you're strong, independent, unbothered, when in reality, you're simply carrying the emotional blueprint of a childhood where no one ever came to help.
3. Emotional cost and philosophical weight. There is a cost to this kind of survival, a cost that adulthood forces you to confront, often painfully. The psychologist Carl Jung once said, The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent. Children of silent trauma know this burden well, because your childhood had a price, the sacrifice of your authenticity. You learn to hide your needs to protect others, to suppress your emotions to maintain harmony, to stay quiet so the house didn't break under the weight of your truth. This creates what I call invisible grief. Grief for the childhood you didn't get. Grief for the emotions you never expressed. Grief for the version of you that learned to lock the door from the inside. And beneath this grief lies the core fear. If I show my real self, I will not be loved. This fear bleeds into everything. A simple compliment feels suspicious. A moment of rest feels dangerous. A quiet conversation feels like the start of conflict. A close relationship feels like a risk of abandonment. Even joy feels fragile, like something you're not allowed to touch. And so you wear your silence like armor, strong enough to shield you, but heavy enough to suffocate you. 4. Adult manifestation and the unlearning process. Silent trauma doesn't disappear with age. It evolves. It shapes the adult you become, often in ways you don't immediately recognize. You might hear yourself in some of these. 1. Relationships. You struggle to open up, not because you don't want connection, but because vulnerability once felt unsafe. You apologize for having needs. You downplay your pain. You feel like a burden even when no one tells you so. 2. Self-worth. You feel too much and not enough at the same time. You stay in unhealthy dynamics because leaving feels like disloyalty. You chase validation but reject praise. 3. Emotional regulation. You bottle everything up until the smallest trigger cracks the dam. You don't know how to express anger without guilt. You don't know how to cry without feeling weak. 4. Boundaries. You overextend. You overgive. You take responsibility for problems that aren't your own. You say yes because saying no feels like a threat to your safety. 5. Career. You become the dependable one, the fixer, the stabilizer, the silent workhorse. You excel, but feel like you're one mistake away from losing everything. 6. Identity. You don't know who you are without being useful. You confuse being needed with being loved. You're so used to carrying others that your arms don't know how to rest. But here is the truth you were never told. These are coping mechanisms, not flaws. These are survival strategies, not personality defects. And healing begins the moment you stop blaming yourself for the way you learned to survive. 5. Healing, conclusion, and affirmation. Healing silent trauma is not about undoing the past. It's about finally giving yourself what no one ever gave you: permission to feel, to need, to take up space. Here's where the journey begins. 1. Inner child reparenting. Speak to the child inside you the way no one spoke to them. Offer the safety, softness, and presence they deserved. 2. Shadow work. Explore the parts of you that were exiled, the anger, the sadness, the longing. Not to judge them, but to understand them. 3. Nervous system regulation. Slow, consistent practices like grounding, breath work, and somatic therapy help teach your body,
You are safe now. 4. Choosing softness over survival mode. You don't have to be hyper vigilant anymore. The danger has passed. Now the task is learning how to live, not just survive. And remember this: the wound is where the light enters you. You are not broken. You are not beyond healing. You are not defined by the silence you were forced to carry. The goal is not to be fixed, but to be whole. If this resonated with you, if it felt like someone finally put your experience into words, then consider sharing this video with someone who needs it, or subscribing for more deep psychological breakdowns like this. Your healing matters. Your voice matters. And it is finally safe to use it.